Okay, we're going to start going back to chapter 3, The Push West. This is a chapter that's going to cover um, uh, one of our migrations from the east to the west. We talked about this in US 1, and this will overlap a lot of the themes that we talked about in chapter 7 last year. But the main thing that's going on right now that we just talked about in chapter 1 and in US 1 is the Civil War. The Civil War devastates the East, especially in the South. A lot of businesses, a lot of farms are destroyed, a lot of upheaval, a lot of changes going on. And anytime that there are changes or difficulties, people are going to leave. We see that today, where uh, there are certain things that are going on, especially in cities. You've got mandates, you've got things that people don't believe in, you have high crime, you have policies by the government that people don't like, and so they're going to vote with their feet and move to another place. Well, what's happening in this time period, around Civil War and then beyond, people, as we saw in in the South, especially African Americans, are thinking to themselves, this is not where I want to live. And so they start moving west. And what we'll also be touching on in this chapter are the Indians, because they'll be heavily affected because they're out west. They were promised this land on the other side of the Mississippi River, and now all the people from the east are coming into this land, and so they're going to have to deal with it again. All right, so go west, grow rich. There's a couple things here that we just want to make sure that we understand is that people in the East are looking to the West. They want to have their own land. They want to start their own lives. They want to have a chance to start over. Whether they lost their business or never had a business, maybe they were a slave and they just want to start a new life and just be left alone. Going west was a great place because there weren't a lot of people out there. What got it all started was the gold strike of 1848. A lot of people hear about this, that somebody finds gold out in California in 1848. And so in 1849, everybody and their mother starts going out to California to try to find more gold. And that's where we get the term 49ers. If you're a football fan, you know that the San Francisco 49ers, they have gold helmets. In fact, let me look it up here. San Francisco, oops, let's go 49ers. All right, let's take a look at, there you go. So we've got San Francisco 49er here. The image pops up. There it is. Gold helmet. And so this legacy survives to this day. Got gold pants. Their bridge in San Francisco is called the Golden Gate Bridge. The basketball team is called the Golden State Warriors. So they are the Golden State. That's where everybody, they were famous for their gold. So people from China, from the East, all over the world really start coming to California, and there's a huge boom. But there's lands in between the California and the East. And so people are not going to make it all the way out there, or they discover that people aren't doing so hot in these gold towns. And so they stop somewhere in between and start settling the entire West. They discover silver in Colorado, copper in Arizona. Um, these mining towns all across the Rocky Mountains start popping up. And so more and more people move out there to try to find their fortune. Another big thing was that the land out there was very cheap. Everybody thought that the land in in the Great Plains was unfarmable. It wasn't a very good land. That this was going to be a difficult place for someone to raise a family and build a farm and make a life for themselves. So the land was either cheap or free. We'll be talking about the Homestead Act later, which allowed people to go and get this very cheap land. And this was the American government's way of getting people to spread out because possession is nine tenths of the law. If you don't move into a land and then another country moves into it, then it becomes disputed. But if your people are there already, then it's undisputed, it's yours. But the main part of today's lesson that I want you to really focus on are these 5 reasons for moving west. Make sure you write these down. The first one is an opportunity to own land. West of the Mississippi, there is plenty of cheap, fertile land perfect for ranching and farming. In 1862, to encourage settlement, the government gave away land to homesteaders, people willing to clear and build upon undeveloped land. So it's just empty land. If you build a farm there, you build a house there, we'll give you this land either for free or cheap. And so this was a very exciting prospect for people who had nothing. They either lost everything or never had anything to begin with, and to own your own land, you feel like a king. You can't be told what to do if you're a farmer. So it was a very high prestige, especially back then, to be able to own your own land. Easy riding. Uh, Things like Transcontinental Railroad, which we'll get into later in this chapter, made it easier to travel all across the United States. The United States is a very big country, and because of the railroad, we're able to get to places much faster. Back then, there were no cars, there were no trucks, no planes, but there were trains coming into existence. I mean, they existed, but the train tracks are coming into existence all across the West because they're trying to get to that gold. And so when you get to, if you want to get there back and forth very quickly and get that gold back east and then send the people out west all these goods that you want to sell them to get that gold, you need trains to transport all this stuff over great distances. And so these trains would stop all along the way, and people would set up towns and settlements around these train stops. So this was another reason for people to move west. Obviously, gold and silver discoveries all throughout California and the Rocky Mountains. They find all these minerals, so people want to go out there and start making money. Number 4, some people are just want adventure. They just want to try something new, especially if you are a soldier. Soldiers are used to very adventurous lives. They've gone many places that people haven't gone to. They've done many things. They are used to a certain way of life. And going back home and just sitting around doing a job at a mill or something, it just doesn't appeal to them. And so they want something more, and they start looking out west to get to strike it rich, whether it's mining or building something new. They want adventure, and so that's number 4. And finally, a chance for equality. The West represents a chance for a fresh start for formerly enslaved African Americans. That's who we're really talking about here. Later on, we'll be talking about immigrants, but when you're living in the South, and we just talked about Jim Crow and all these things that are happening to African Americans in the South, they had basically 2 choices. They could move to the North, where they're going to experience similar, not as bad, but similar types of discrimination. Or they could move out west where there's just nothing there. Nobody's going to bother them. They could start their own lives, doing their own thing. And so that is very appealing for African Americans to move out there and just have a completely fresh start. And sometimes this was a necessity. Uh, if people were coming after you and trying to hurt you or worse to you and your family, you may really have no choice but to leave and go to a place like the West.